originally run by George Carlo, who was between 1993 and 1997. During this whole time when Congress said, we want to know some information about that, he was conducting the studies on behalf of the cell phone industry. And he found micronuclei, which are connected with DNA breaks and so on, were showing up, and they wanted to, continue monitoring the long-term effects of this radiation on the population, because these things don't happen instantaneously. It's hard to show the cause and effect. But over time, when this technology is being used, more and more things show up in the literature when you do what's called long-term epidemiological studies. And the interesting thing is, he warned the industry. I think that program was terminated in 1999. He wrote a book about that, about the impact of cell phones and so on. And, they actually won a court settlement to continue to do some research afterwards, because he was terminated, or his contract ended, but he has since continued to warn people about this. The problem is that these things take 10 years or more to occur, and that was my concern about once smart meters get installed. They have a 20-year life expectancy, and they're going to be on our homes pulsing away. And they're part of a what's called a mesh network, so that your power information is sent through the power meter of your neighbor and all the neighborhood, because that way they can just transmit the power information from point to point, from meter to meter, through all the houses in the neighborhood until they go to a collection center. We're on top of a higher pole where it's relayed to the utility. So our whole neighborhoods get more of a level of radiation exposure that we hadn't bargained for initially, and it could have been done differently with, say, wired meters. So I hope that helps, say that right now we're in this soup, we're in this radiation, and I think the people who are very sensitive to that, and that's a subset of the population, could be adversely affected, and the final evidence isn't in.
But there's another thing, too, Karl, which is that you don't have to be electrically sensitive to be impacted within 10 years of this radiation pulsing away at your body. So let's say you're not electrically sensitive. It doesn't mean that it's not deteriorating your immune system and your cellular system and your red blood cells, etc.
Well, most likely it'll more impact your immune system with the white blood cells. The red blood cells carry more of the oxygen.
Okay.
I haven't seen much about the red blood cells, but, we do know that one should study this. One should look at the population overall. We do know that people aren't so well overall. Our health seems to be decreasing. It's my hypothesis, and it's just that actually all this background of microwave radiation that we're now living in, and it's getting exposed to all of us to some degree, and if we're living in cities or we're in places near cell towers and so on, we're certainly getting more of it, that over time it definitely can have this effect. It has this on cell cultures, on animals, and on people. People, of course, who use a cell phone near their head, and the manual actually says you shouldn't put it closer than 5/8 of an inch for an iPhone, and about 0.98 inches or an inch away if you use a BlackBerry. I mean, there's a reason why that's written in your manual. It's also interesting to note that many of the telecommunications companies, the cellular phone providers and so on, can't get reinsurance by companies like Swiss Re and Lloyd's of London and so on. They've actually not been able to give any of those kind of insurance for health-related lawsuits later on. So this is, I think, something that might show up after a while. And looking at the work of, say, Leonard Hardell's work in Sweden and many others who have looked at it there, they see that after 10 years use, people who are using cell phones have a greater than twofold increase in brain tumors and acoustic neuromas, which are specialized tumors in the ear, and other ones, after 10 years use, and it's on the same side where typically people have used it. And if kids start under the age of 20 using cordless phones and cell phones, that risk has gone up by fivefold. So there's 5 more brain tumors incidents. Not that that's as yet, a big epidemic, but it's we're all exposed to this, and so the user has to keep these away from their body. And naturally, something that is a transmitter next to your head gives you the greatest degree of concern. Obviously, there is heating in the brain. You can measure that with thermograms. You can see increased blood flow to that area. And there was actually a study done how it affects the brain, not by heating it alone, but by metabolic change in the brain. This came out, Nora Volkoff's study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association on February 23rd of this year. And they actually showed, first study done for a long time in America that I'd seen, published in a reputable medical journal, that showed that 3 areas of the brain nearest to where a phone was operating versus on the other side of the head where the phone wasn't operating. On the side where the phone was operating, there was a decrease in blood sugar to the brain measured by positron emission tomography or PET scans. So we could actually measure changes in blood or brain glucose utilization in 3 areas of the brain, and this confirms stuff that was measured in earlier studies where there's a potential break in the what's called the blood-brain barrier. Yeah, the blood-brain barrier has already been studied by people like Alan Fry and other people who've showed that these microwaves affect brain chemicals, the opiate dopamine system in the brain. Those are neurotransmitters or brain chemicals we use, and make these devices, I think, somewhat, addictive. And when you kind of see how everybody's, communicating with their little device, without seeing that they're, or understanding that they're using microwaves to radiate their head, and specifically pulsed microwave, unlike your microwave oven, which is a continuous frequency at 2.45 gigahertz. These things pulsate, and the pulsation is what causes real problems. And the same thing with the smart meters. They're also pulsating.
I want to say a couple of things to you. One is that I'm sure you're familiar that the FCC wants to basically get rid of all landlines in the U.S., which I find absolutely frightening.
The FCC has been petitioned, as I understand it, by large carriers, maybe AT&T, I think I've seen, and others. They want to get rid of them because for them it's economically, less favorable. They lose money now on landlines, but everybody is using the cell phones, but without understanding that they're using microwaves. So the FCC has been petitioned by them to say, let's get rid of these. People aren't using them anymore. They can be always on with the other thing, and it makes more money for us. So
very scary. Very, very scary. The other thing is countries like Russia have known the danger and seriousness of the microwaves. Countries like Switzerland and Liechtenstein and the Netherlands make getting smart meters voluntary. But we won't get that chance, will we, here in the United States?
That's what we've been, essentially lobbying for with the with the CPUC in California and other states. People are going to the Public Utilities Commission and say, we want to make these voluntary. Let the market choose. If people are properly informed, let them decide whether they want a microwave pulsating smart meter on their house or a wired one, or keep the old analog meter, which has worked quite well. The problem with those, of course, is that you only get information once a month when the meter reader comes, and this way they save money by getting rid of the meter readers, getting information all the time, and then the utilities can, of course, say, well, you're using it during our peak time, and we'll have to charge you more for that, and that's why the bills have gone up in certain regions. People have bitterly complained about that, but they said, well, we've been undercharging you all this time by averaging your power. Now we can tell you specifically how you use it. Unfortunately, that leads to a potential problem of privacy if they could ever intercept these signals. And some people have said that might be a possibility. Then, all kinds of information could be sent. In Texas, I think they passed a requirement that your utility usage information, your power usage information, is your own private information and can't be used without your permission. So, but here in California, once a utility has it, they can tell a lot about the use